Sarah Martinez never imagined she would hold a weapon designed to kill. Growing up in a small town in New Mexico, she spent her childhood rescuing injured birds and nursing stray cats back to health. Her mother often joked that Sarah had magic in her fingers, the way wounded creatures seemed to heal faster under her care. When other kids played war games, Sarah played hospital, always choosing to be the doctor who saved everyone. The path to becoming a Navy SEAL medic wasn't something Sarah planned either. She had been studying pre-med at the University of New Mexico when the September 11th attacks happened. Like many young Americans, she felt a calling to serve her country, but unlike most, she wanted to serve by saving lives, not taking them. The Navy offered her the perfect opportunity to combine her medical skills with her desire to serve in the most challenging environments possible. SEAL training was brutal beyond anything Sarah had experienced. The instructors pushed every candidate to their absolute limits, testing not just physical strength, but mental resilience. During Hell Week, when many strong men quit, Sarah endured by focusing on her purpose. Every time her body screamed for her to ring the bell and quit, she reminded herself of the lives she could save. She pictured herself on a battlefield, pulling wounded warriors to safety, and that image gave her the strength to push through another day. Her fellow trainees initially doubted whether a woman could handle the physical demands of SEAL operations. Sarah was smaller than most of them, standing just 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing only 140 pounds. But what she lacked in size, she made up for in determination and intelligence. She outperformed many larger candidates in navigation exercises, showed exceptional skill in medical training, and demonstrated an uncanny ability to remain calm under pressure. The medical training portion of her SEAL education was where Sarah truly shined. She absorbed every lesson about battlefield medicine with an intensity that impressed even veteran instructors. She learned to perform surgery with limited supplies, treat gunshot wounds in combat conditions, and make life-or-death decisions in seconds. Her hands, which had once been gentle with injured animals, became steady and precise when working on human patients during training exercises. By the time Sarah completed SEAL training, she had earned the respect of her classmates and instructors. She graduated in the top 10% of her class, specializing in combat medicine and tactical field operations. Her first assignment was with SEAL Team 6, one of the most elite special operations units in the military. The team she joined had been operating together for 3 years and had completed numerous successful missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. Team leader Lieutenant Commander Marcus Thompson was initially skeptical about having a female medic on his team. He had worked with many combat medics over his 12-year career, and while he respected their skills, he worried about how the dynamics might change with a woman in the unit. However, his doubts quickly disappeared after Sarah's first training exercise with the team. During a simulated raid in Virginia, one of the team members suffered a severe training injury when a rappelling rope snapped. Petty Officer First Class David Kim fell 30 feet and landed hard on rocky ground, suffering multiple fractures and internal bleeding. Sarah was the first to reach him, and what happened next amazed everyone watching. Working with complete focus and precision, Sarah stabilized Kim's condition within minutes. She identified internal bleeding that others had missed, administered the correct medications, and coordinated his evacuation with remarkable efficiency. Her calm demeanor under pressure and exceptional medical skills saved Kim's life and prevented him from suffering permanent disabilities. From that day forward, every member of the team trusted Sarah completely. The team's first deployment together was to Afghanistan in early 2017. Their mission was to conduct reconnaissance and direct action operations against high-value targets in the mountainous regions near the Pakistan border. It was dangerous work that required them to operate in small groups, often behind enemy lines for days at a time. Sarah quickly established herself as an invaluable member of the team. Her medical skills were exceptional, but she also proved to be an excellent strategist and observer. During their first mission, she spotted an improvised explosive device that others had missed, potentially saving the entire team from serious injury or death. Her attention to detail and ability to notice things others overlooked made her a natural intelligence gatherer. The team's base of operations was a remote outpost called Firebase Alpha, located high in the Hindu Kush Mountains. The base was small, housing only about 50 personnel, including SEALs, Army Rangers, and support staff. Living conditions were basic, with limited amenities and constant exposure to harsh weather conditions. The nearest major base was over 200 miles away, accessible only by helicopter when weather permitted. During their first month at Firebase Alpha, Sarah treated everything from minor injuries to serious combat wounds. She removed shrapnel from a soldier's leg, treated severe burns from an IED explosion, and saved the life of a ranger who had been shot by a sniper. Her reputation as an exceptional medic spread throughout the base, and soldiers from other units began seeking her out for medical care. What impressed everyone most about Sarah was her ability to remain calm and focused regardless of the situation. Whether she was treating a minor cut or performing emergency surgery, she maintained the same steady demeanor. Her hands never shook, her voice never wavered, and she never showed fear, even when treating patients under enemy fire. The team's commanding officer, Colonel James Mitchell, took notice of Sarah's exceptional performance. In his 12 years of commanding special operations units, he had worked with many outstanding medics, but Sarah stood out for her combination of medical expertise, tactical awareness, and leadership qualities. He began giving her additional responsibilities beyond her medical duties. Sarah embraced these new challenges with enthusiasm. She volunteered for additional training in communications, explosives, and intelligence gathering. During her off-duty hours, she studied maps of the region, learned basic phrases in the local languages, and familiarized herself with enemy tactics and strategies. Her dedication to continuous improvement impressed everyone who worked with her. As winter approached, the team's missions became more challenging. The harsh weather conditions made helicopter support unreliable, meaning they often had to operate without the possibility of quick evacuation if someone was injured. The isolation added pressure to every mission, and Sarah felt the weight of responsibility for keeping her teammates healthy and alive. During one particularly difficult mission in late October, the team was tasked with establishing an observation post overlooking a valley suspected of being used as a transit route for enemy fighters. They would need to remain in position for 72 hours, maintaining constant surveillance while avoiding detection. The mission required them to carry minimal equipment and operate with no possibility of resupply or reinforcement. Sarah carefully planned the medical supplies she would take on the mission. Space and weight were limited, so she had to prioritize the most essential items. She packed trauma supplies for treating gunshot wounds, antibiotics for infections, painkillers for managing injuries, and emergency surgery equipment. Every item had to serve multiple purposes, and every ounce of weight had to be justified. The observation post was located on a ridge approximately 8,000 feet above sea level. The team would have to hike 12 miles through difficult terrain to reach their position, carrying all their equipment and supplies. Once there, they would establish a hidden position with clear views of the valley below, while remaining invisible to enemy forces. The hike to the observation post took 8 hours, with the team moving carefully to avoid detection. Sarah carried her full medical kit plus her personal equipment, weapons, and ammunition. Despite the heavy load and difficult terrain, she never complained or asked for help. Her teammates noticed her determination and were impressed by her physical and mental toughness. Reaching the observation post as the sun was setting, the team quickly established their position and began their surveillance mission. Sarah set up a small medical station in a protected area where she could treat injuries if necessary. She organized her supplies carefully, ensuring everything was easily accessible in the dark. The first night passed without incident, but Sarah remained alert throughout her watch shifts. She knew that in this remote location, any serious injury could become life-threatening if not treated quickly and correctly. The responsibility for keeping her teammates alive in such an isolated environment was something she took very seriously. As dawn broke on their second day at the observation post, Sarah had no idea that within 24 hours, everything she thought she knew about herself would change forever. The gentle healer who had dedicated her life to saving others was about to discover capabilities she never knew she possessed. The second day at the observation post began with an eerie calm that made Sarah's instincts prickle with unease. She had learned to trust these feelings during her months in Afghanistan, where the difference between paranoia and survival was often measured in seconds. As she checked on each team member during the early morning hours, everything appeared normal, but something felt different about the valley below. Through her binoculars, Sarah observed the same rocky terrain and scattered vegetation they had been watching for 24 hours. The valley appeared empty except for the occasional bird or small animal moving through the brush. However, her trained eye caught subtle changes that others might miss. The patterns of animal movement seemed different, and there were small disturbances in the vegetation that hadn't been there the day before. Team leader Thompson noticed Sarah's concerned expression as she lowered her binoculars. Over the past months, he had learned to pay attention when Sarah sensed something unusual. Her medical training had given her exceptional observational skills, and her intuition about potential dangers had proven accurate multiple times during previous missions. "What do you see down there, Martinez?" Thompson asked quietly, moving to position himself beside her. Sarah pointed toward several areas in the valley floor where she had noticed the disturbances. The wildlife patterns changed overnight. Animals are avoiding certain areas they used freely yesterday. There are also some vegetation disturbances that look fresh, possibly from people moving through during the night. Thompson studied the same areas through his scope, but couldn't identify the subtle signs that Sarah had detected. This was typical of their working relationship. Sarah's attention to detail often revealed things that others missed, while Thompson's tactical expertise helped interpret the significance of her observations. Could be locals moving livestock or gathering wood, Thompson suggested, though his tone indicated he was taking her concerns seriously. "Possibly," Sarah replied, "but the disturbance patterns don't match typical civilian movement. They're too systematic and show evidence of people trying to avoid leaving obvious tracks." The rest of the team maintained their surveillance positions while Thompson and Sarah discussed her observations. Petty Officer Kim was monitoring radio communications, Petty Officer Rodriguez was watching the northern approach routes, and Petty Officer Jackson was documenting all movement and activities in the valley for their mission report. As the morning progressed, Sarah's concerns proved justified. Around 10 a.m., Kim detected radio chatter on frequencies known to be used by enemy forces. The transmissions were brief and coded, but intelligence analysts had previously identified similar patterns preceding attacks on coalition forces. "We've got multiple enemy radio transmissions coming from at least 3 different locations in the valley," Kim reported quietly. "Signal strength suggests they're moving closer to our position." Thompson immediately began implementing defensive procedures. The team's observation post was well concealed, but if enemy forces were actively searching for coalition positions, they might eventually be discovered. The nearest friendly forces were over 60 miles away, making immediate reinforcement impossible. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly, but her training kept her focused and calm. She mentally reviewed the locations of all her medical supplies and considered how she might need to adapt her treatment procedures if the team came under attack. In their current position, a helicopter evacuation would be extremely difficult even under the best circumstances. By midday, the situation had escalated significantly. Rodriguez spotted approximately 15 enemy fighters moving through the valley in small groups. They appeared to be conducting a systematic search of the area, checking caves and potential hiding places where coalition forces might establish positions. "They're definitely looking for us or another coalition unit," Thompson observed. "We need to assume they have intelligence about our presence in this area." The team faced a difficult decision. They could attempt to evacuate their position and return to base, but moving during daylight would make them vulnerable to detection and attack. Alternatively, they could remain in position and hope the enemy search parties wouldn't discover their carefully concealed observation post. Thompson decided to remain in position while reporting their situation to headquarters. However, radio communication with their base was difficult due to the mountainous terrain and atmospheric conditions. Kim was able to establish brief contact, but couldn't maintain a clear connection long enough to coordinate potential support. As the afternoon progressed, the enemy forces moved closer to the team's position. Sarah could see individual fighters through her binoculars as they searched rocky areas and vegetation that could conceal people or equipment. Their systematic approach suggested they had training and experience in locating hidden positions. Around 4 p.m., the team's worst fears were realized when Rodriguez spotted an enemy fighter approximately 400 meters from their position, moving directly toward their concealment. The fighter appeared to be following tracks or other signs that could lead him to discover the observation post. Thompson made the decision to prepare for contact. Each team member checked their weapons and equipment while maintaining silence and concealment. Sarah reviewed her medical supplies one final time, knowing that if fighting started, she might need to treat injuries quickly and efficiently. The enemy fighter continued approaching their position, moving carefully but steadily up the ridge toward their concealment. Sarah could see him clearly now through her binoculars, a young man with a rifle who appeared determined and focused on tracking something toward their location. When the fighter reached a position only 200 meters from their observation post, Thompson knew they had to act. If the enemy discovered their position, they would quickly be surrounded and overwhelmed by superior numbers. The team's only advantage was the element of surprise, which they would lose if they waited much longer. Thompson signaled for Rodriguez to eliminate the approaching threat. Rodriguez was the team's designated marksman, trained and equipped for long-range precision shooting. He carefully lined up his shot while the rest of the team prepared for the possibility that the gunshot would alert other enemy forces to their position. The single rifle shot echoed across the valley, and the approaching fighter dropped immediately. Rodriguez's marksmanship was excellent, but the sound of the gunshot had indeed alerted the other enemy forces to their general location. Within minutes, radio chatter increased dramatically as the remaining fighters began converging on the ridge. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with combat situations, but her medical training kept her focused on her responsibilities. She positioned herself where she could reach any injured team member quickly while maintaining cover from enemy fire. Her role during combat was to keep her teammates alive and fighting effective. The enemy forces began ascending the ridge from multiple directions, making coordinated movement difficult for the small SEAL team. Thompson realized they were facing a situation that could quickly become overwhelming. The team's best option might be to break contact and attempt to evade the enemy forces while moving toward a location where helicopter extraction might be possible. However, before they could implement an evasion plan, enemy forces appeared on the ridge above their position, effectively cutting off their primary escape route. The team was now surrounded on 3 sides, with only one possible direction of movement that wouldn't expose them to immediate enemy fire. "We're going to have to fight our way out," Thompson announced quietly. "Martinez, stay close and be ready to move quickly if someone gets hit." Sarah acknowledged the order while checking her medical kit one final time. She had trained for this exact scenario countless times, but the reality of treating combat injuries while under enemy fire was something no training exercise could fully replicate. The first exchange of gunfire began when enemy fighters on the ridge above opened fire on the team's position. The SEALs were well protected by the rocky terrain, but the enemy forces had the advantage of high ground and superior numbers. Return fire from the team was accurate and effective, but Thompson knew they couldn't sustain a prolonged firefight. During the initial exchange, Jackson was struck by a fragment from a bullet that hit a rock near his position. The injury wasn't life-threatening, but he was bleeding from several cuts on his face and arms. Sarah immediately moved to treat his wounds while the firefight continued around them. Working quickly and efficiently, Sarah cleaned and bandaged Jackson's injuries while he continued to return fire at enemy positions. Her calm demeanor and steady hands allowed her to provide effective medical care, even as bullets struck rocks and ricocheted around their position. "I'm good to go," Jackson reported after Sarah finished treating his wounds. "Thanks, document." The firefight continued for 30 minutes, with both sides exchanging sporadic gunfire while maneuvering for better positions. The enemy forces were trying to surround the team completely, while the SEALs were looking for an opportunity to break contact and move toward an extraction point. As the sun began to set, Thompson knew they were running out of time. Operating in darkness would give the team some advantages, but it would also make movement more dangerous and medical treatment more difficult if anyone suffered serious injuries. That's when everything changed in a way that nobody, especially Sarah herself, could have predicted. The transformation began with a single bullet that changed everything in an instant. Rodriguez, the team's expert marksman, was lining up a shot at an enemy fighter who had moved to a position threatening their escape route when a sniper's bullet found its mark. The round struck Rodriguez in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing against the rocky wall behind their position. Sarah reached Rodriguez within seconds, her medical training overriding every other consideration. Blood was flowing freely from his shoulder wound, and his right arm hung uselessly at his side. More critically, the bullet had struck dangerously close to major arteries and nerves that could result in permanent disability or death if not treated immediately. "I can't feel my arm," Rodriguez gasped as Sarah began cutting away his uniform to access the wound. "I can't move my fingers." The bullet had indeed damaged nerves controlling Rodriguez's right hand and arm. Sarah worked quickly to stop the bleeding and stabilize the injury, but she knew that Rodriguez would not be able to use his rifle effectively, if at all. The team had just lost their primary marksman at the moment when precision shooting was most critical to their survival. Thompson realized the implications immediately. Without Rodriguez's marksmanship skills, they would have difficulty suppressing enemy positions accurately enough to break contact safely. The enemy forces had positioned themselves on high ground with excellent fields of fire, making movement extremely dangerous without precise covering fire. "How bad is it?" Thompson asked as Sarah continued working on Rodriguez's injury. "He'll live, but he won't be shooting anything with that arm for a long time," Sarah replied while applying pressure bandages to control the bleeding. "Nerve damage is significant." Kim and Jackson continued returning fire at enemy positions, but their shooting was designed more for suppression than precision elimination of specific threats. The enemy fighters were using cover effectively, making them difficult targets for anything other than expert marksmanship. As Sarah finished treating Rodriguez's immediate injuries, she became aware of the team's tactical situation in a way that was completely different from her usual medical focus. Her mind began processing the positions of enemy fighters, the angles of available shots, and the distances involved with startling clarity and precision. Rodriguez's rifle lay on the ground beside him, a precision instrument that Sarah had seen him use countless times but had never touched herself. SEAL medics received basic marksmanship training, but their primary weapon was typically a shorter-range rifle designed for close-quarters combat rather than long-range precision shooting. The enemy sniper who had shot Rodriguez was still active, positioned approximately 600 meters away on a ridge that provided excellent visibility of the team's position. Thompson, Kim, and Jackson were all capable shooters, but none had the specialized training and experience necessary to engage a target at that range with the precision required to neutralize the threat. Sarah found herself staring at Rodriguez's rifle while her mind calculated angles, distances, wind effects, and other factors that she shouldn't have known how to assess. The knowledge seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her consciousness, as if skills and capabilities that had been dormant throughout her life were suddenly awakening. "Martinez, we need you to stay focused on medical support," Thompson said, noticing her attention on the rifle. "We'll figure out how to deal with that sniper." But Sarah was no longer thinking like a medic. The analytical skills that made her exceptional at diagnosing injuries and planning treatments had shifted into an entirely different mode. She was processing the tactical situation with the same systematic precision she used for medical procedures, and solutions were becoming clear in her mind. "Give me the rifle," she said quietly, surprising everyone, including herself. "Sarah, you're not trained for precision shooting," Thompson replied. "We need you ready to treat injuries." "Everyone here knows basic field medicine," Sarah responded, her voice taking on a tone of certainty that was completely unfamiliar. "I'm the only one who can make that shot." Thompson looked at her with confusion and concern. Sarah had never demonstrated any particular interest in marksmanship beyond the basic requirements of her training. The idea that she could successfully engage a target at 600 meters with a rifle she had never used seemed unrealistic and potentially dangerous. However, the enemy sniper fired again, this time striking Kim in the leg. The bullet shattered his fibula and left him unable to walk or move effectively. Sarah immediately began treating Kim's injury, but now two of the team's four shooters were out of action, leaving only Thompson and Jackson to provide covering fire. "We're going to be overrun if we don't neutralize that sniper," Jackson observed while firing at enemy positions closer to their location. "He's picking us apart piece by piece." Sarah finished stabilizing Kim's leg injury and turned her attention back to Rodriguez's rifle. As she picked up the weapon, something extraordinary happened. The rifle felt completely natural in her hands, as if she had been shooting precision instruments her entire life. Her hands automatically found the correct positions, and her body assumed a shooting stance that felt perfectly comfortable and familiar. Thompson watched in amazement as Sarah's entire demeanor transformed. The gentle, caring medic disappeared, replaced by someone who handled the rifle with unmistakable expertise and confidence. Her movements were precise and purposeful, showing none of the hesitation or uncertainty that would be expected from someone using an unfamiliar weapon. "How do you know how to do that?" Thompson asked quietly. "I don't know," Sarah replied honestly, adjusting the rifle's scope with practiced efficiency. "I just do." Sarah studied the enemy sniper's position through the scope, automatically calculating the adjustments needed for distance, wind, and elevation. The knowledge seemed to flow from some previously unknown source within her mind, as if she was accessing skills and training that she had never actually received. The enemy sniper was partially concealed behind rocky cover, approximately 600 meters away. Sarah could see portions of his body and equipment through the scope, but a clean shot would require perfect timing and precision. The target would be exposed for only brief moments as he moved to acquire shots at her team. As Sarah settled into her shooting position, her teammates noticed something remarkable happening. Her breathing became controlled and rhythmic, her body relaxed into perfect stillness, and her hands stopped trembling from adrenaline. She had become completely calm and focused despite the chaos and danger surrounding them. "Take your time," Rodriguez whispered, despite his own pain. "You've got this." Sarah found herself entering a mental state that was completely unfamiliar, yet felt entirely natural. Her awareness expanded to include every factor that could affect her shot, while simultaneously narrowing to focus on the precise moment when the target would be vulnerable. Time seemed to slow down as she waited for the perfect opportunity. The enemy sniper moved slightly to acquire another shot at the team's position, exposing enough of his upper body for Sarah to have a clear target. Without conscious thought, her finger began applying pressure to the trigger with a gradual, smooth motion that characterizes expert marksmanship. The shot surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the valley, and through the scope, Sarah watched the enemy sniper drop immediately. The bullet had found its target with deadly accuracy, eliminating the threat that had been systematically wounding her teammates. Thompson stared at Sarah with complete amazement. The shot she had just made would have been challenging for Rodriguez, an expert marksman with years of training and experience. For Sarah to accomplish the same thing with a rifle she had never used seemed impossible. "Where did that come from?" Thompson asked. Sarah lowered the rifle, looking as surprised as anyone else. "I have no idea," she replied honestly. "It felt like I've been shooting my entire life." The elimination of the enemy sniper significantly improved the team's tactical situation, but they still faced multiple enemy fighters in positions that threatened their escape routes. Sarah's unexpected marksmanship skills had solved one critical problem, but several others remained. Kim, despite his leg injury, pointed toward another enemy position that was preventing the team from moving toward their planned extraction point. "There's a machine gun team about 800 meters to the northwest. They got our route covered." Sarah looked toward the position Kim had indicated, and once again, her mind began automatically calculating the shot requirements. The distance was greater, the targets were partially concealed, and the angle was more challenging, but the same mysterious confidence filled her consciousness. "I can take them," she heard herself saying, though the rational part of her mind couldn't believe those words were coming from her mouth. What happened next would become legendary among special operations units and change how military leaders thought about human potential under extreme stress. What emerged in Sarah during the next hour will be studied by military psychologists for years to come. As she positioned herself for the shot at the machine gun team 800 meters away, something fundamental had changed in her neural pathways. The gentle hands that had sutured countless wounds now gripped the rifle with predatory precision, and her eyes that had looked for signs of life now searched for the perfect moment to take it. The machine gun position was more complex than the sniper shot. Two enemy fighters were operating the weapon from behind a rocky outcropping that provided excellent protection. Sarah could see only small portions of their bodies through the scope, and they moved unpredictably as they adjusted their position to fire at different targets. Thompson watched in fascination as Sarah studied the enemy position with a systematic approach she normally applied to medical diagnoses. She observed their movement patterns, identified vulnerabilities in their protective cover, and calculated the precise timing needed to engage both targets effectively. The gunner exposures himself for approximately 2 seconds every time he adjusts the weapon's position, Sarah reported with clinical precision. The assistant gunner is visible for longer periods, but only from specific angles. Her analysis was remarkable not just for its accuracy, but for the speed with which she processed complex information. Sarah had somehow developed an intuitive understanding of ballistics, target movement, and tactical timing that typically required years of specialized training to acquire. Rodriguez, despite his injury, was amazed by what he was witnessing. "Martinez, I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone pick up precision shooting this quickly. How are you reading those positions so accurately?" "I don't know how I know," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the same mysterious confidence that had appeared earlier. "I just see the patterns clearly." Sarah made minute adjustments to the rifle's scope and settled into her shooting position. Her breathing became deep and rhythmic as she entered the focused mental state that had emerged during her first shot. The chaos and noise of the ongoing firefight seemed to fade into the background as her attention narrowed to the target area. The machine gun team was actively engaging targets, which meant they were focused on their sector of fire rather than watching for threats from other directions. This gave Sarah a tactical advantage, but the shots would still require perfect timing and precision to be effective. Through the scope, Sarah watched the gunner's movement patterns while simultaneously tracking the assistant gunner's position. She needed to eliminate both targets in rapid succession to prevent the survivor from continuing to operate the weapon or alerting other enemy forces to her position. As the gunner adjusted his weapon's elevation to engage a new target, he exposed enough of his upper torso for Sarah to have a clear shot. Without hesitation, she fired, watching through the scope as the bullet found its target with devastating accuracy. The gunner collapsed immediately, struck in the center of his chest. The assistant gunner reacted to his partner's fall by moving toward the weapon, exposing himself exactly as Sarah had predicted he would. Her second shot followed within 3 seconds of the first, dropping the assistant gunner before he could reach the machine gun or alert other enemy fighters to the threat. 2 shots, 2 kills, at 800 meters with a rifle she had never used before. The mathematical probability of such accuracy was so low that Thompson wondered if he was witnessing some kind of miracle or breakdown in the normal rules of reality. "Impossible," Kim whispered from his position. "Nobody shoots like that without years of training." But Sarah was already scanning for additional targets, her transformed consciousness searching for threats that needed to be eliminated. The systematic precision she had always applied to medical procedures was now being directed toward identifying and neutralizing enemy positions with deadly efficiency. Jackson pointed toward another enemy position approximately 500 meters to the east. "There's a group of fighters moving through that rocky area. They're trying to flank our position." Sarah shifted her attention to the area Jackson had indicated, and Her enhanced perception immediately identified 5 enemy fighters moving tactically through terrain that provided intermittent concealment. They were advancing carefully, using cover effectively, but Sarah's newfound skills allowed her to predict their movement patterns with startling accuracy. "I can see their route," Sarah reported. "They'll be exposed at 3 specific points as they advance. I can engage them sequentially." Thompson realized that Sarah had somehow developed capabilities that exceeded those of professional snipers he had worked with throughout his career. Her ability to read terrain, predict movement, and calculate complex shots was operating at a level that seemed superhuman. The first of the flanking fighters exposed himself as he moved between rocky cover points, exactly as Sarah had predicted. Her shot dropped him instantly, causing the remaining fighters to seek cover and reassess their advance route. However, Sarah's enhanced perception allowed her to anticipate their revised movements as well. The second fighter made the mistake of exposing himself while trying to locate the source of the gunfire that had killed his teammate. Sarah's bullet found him before he could identify her position, adding another impossible shot to her rapidly growing tally. The remaining 3 fighters were now aware that they were being engaged by a precision shooter, making them much more cautious in their movements. However, this actually worked to Sarah's advantage, as their hesitation created predictable patterns that her transformed consciousness could exploit. Rodriguez watched in amazement as Sarah eliminated the third fighter with a shot that required her to calculate the trajectory around partial concealment. The bullet curved slightly due to wind effects and found its target through a gap in the rocks that most shooters wouldn't have even attempted to use. "This isn't possible," Rodriguez said quietly. "She's making shots that I couldn't make on my best day." The fourth fighter attempted to retreat back toward his original position, but Sarah had already calculated his most likely escape route. Her shot intercepted him as he moved through what he thought was safe terrain, demonstrating an understanding of tactical movement that shouldn't have been possible for someone with her training background. The final fighter remained frozen behind cover, apparently paralyzed by the systematic elimination of his entire team. Sarah could see portions of his equipment through the scope, but no clear shot at his body. Rather than wait for him to move, she demonstrated another impossible skill by placing a bullet precisely against the edge of his cover, creating rock fragments that forced him to change position. As the fighter moved to escape the rock fragments, he exposed himself for less than 1 second. Sarah's final shot in the sequence found its target during that brief window, completing the elimination of the entire flanking force with 5 shots fired over approximately 4 minutes. Thompson stared at Sarah with a mixture of amazement and concern. What he had just witnessed defied every assumption about human learning and capability development. Sarah had somehow accessed skills and knowledge that typically required years to develop, and she was demonstrating them at a level that exceeded expert practitioners. "Martinez, where did this come from?" Thompson asked directly. "This level of marksmanship doesn't just appear from nowhere." Sarah lowered the rifle and looked at her team leader with genuine confusion. "I honestly don't know," she replied. "It's like I've always known how to do this, but I never realized it until today." Kim, despite his injury, had been observing Sarah's shooting with professional interest. "The way you're reading those positions and calculating those shots is incredible. It's like you can see patterns and possibilities that the rest of us miss." "I can," Sarah admitted. "I don't understand it, but I can see exactly where they're going to move and when they'll be vulnerable." The elimination of the machine gun team and flanking force had dramatically improved the team's tactical situation. The enemy forces were now hesitant to advance, having lost multiple fighters to a precision shooter whose position they couldn't identify. This gave Thompson the opportunity to plan their extraction while Sarah continued providing overwatch. However, the enemy forces were not defeated, merely disrupted. Radio intercepts suggested that reinforcements were moving toward their position, and the team would need to evacuate before being overwhelmed by superior numbers. As Thompson began planning their escape route, Sarah remained in her shooting position, scanning for additional threats with the enhanced perception that had mysteriously awakened within her. What she saw through the scope would present the greatest challenge yet to her newfound abilities. Through the rifle scope, Sarah detected movement that made her enhanced perception surge with intensity. approximately 1,200 meters away, well beyond the range most snipers would consider practical. An enemy sniper team was establishing a position that would dominate the team's planned escape route. The distance was extreme, the target was partially concealed, and environmental factors would make the shot extraordinarily difficult. "We have a problem," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the calm authority that had emerged with her transformed abilities. "There's a sniper team setting up at 1,200 meters. They'll have clear shots at our extraction route." Thompson studied the distant position through his binoculars, but could barely make out the figures Sarah had identified. "Are you sure you can see them clearly at that range?" "I can see them perfectly," Sarah replied with startling confidence. The primary sniper is wearing a ghillie suit and carrying a rifle with a large scope. The spotter has range-finding equipment and radio communications gear. Her ability to identify specific details at such an extreme distance amazed her teammates. Rodriguez, despite his injury, understood the implications immediately. "Martinez, that's an impossible shot under these conditions. The range, the wind, the angle, everything is working against you." But Sarah was already calculating factors that her consciousness seemed to understand intuitively. Wind speed and direction, atmospheric pressure, bullet drop over the extended distance, and the precise moment when the target would be most vulnerable. The knowledge flowed through her mind with the same natural ease as medical procedures once had. "I can make this shot," she said with absolute certainty. Thompson faced a difficult decision. Allowing Sarah to attempt such an extreme shot would expend ammunition they might need for their escape. If she missed, the enemy sniper would be alerted to their position and capabilities. However, if the enemy sniper remained in position, he would be able to engage the team during their evacuation with devastating effect. "The math doesn't work," Jackson observed, studying the distant position. 1,100 meters is already beyond effective range for most rifles. 1,200 meters in these conditions should be impossible. Sarah made subtle adjustments to the rifle scope, while her transformed consciousness processed calculations that defied her medical training background. Somehow, she understood exactly how the bullet would behave over the extended distance, how environmental factors would affect its trajectory, and when the target would present the optimal opportunity. "Trust me," she said simply, settling into her shooting position with the same focused calm that had characterized her previous shots. Kim watched in fascination as Sarah entered the meditative state that seemed to accompany her extraordinary marksmanship. Her breathing became deep and rhythmic, her body achieved perfect stillness, and her entire being focused on the distant target with laser-like intensity. Through the scope, Sarah could see the enemy sniper making final adjustments to his position. He was an experienced shooter who had chosen his location well, with excellent concealment and clear fields of fire. Under normal circumstances, he would be virtually undetectable and completely safe from return fire at such extreme range. But these were not normal circumstances, and Sarah was no longer operating within normal human limitations. Her enhanced perception allowed her to see opportunities and possibilities that should not have been visible to someone with her training and experience. The enemy sniper moved slightly to acquire a better view of the team's position, exposing a small portion of his upper torso for approximately 2 seconds. For most shooters, this brief exposure at such extreme range would be meaningless. For Sarah, it represented a clear and achievable target. Her finger began applying pressure to the trigger with a smooth, gradual motion that had become instinctive. Time seemed to slow down as her consciousness focused on the precise moment when all variables would align perfectly for the shot. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the valley. Sarah watched through the scope as the bullet traveled its long arc through the air, following the trajectory her mind had calculated with impossible precision. After what seemed like an eternity, but was actually less than 2 seconds, the bullet found its target. The enemy sniper dropped immediately, struck in the center of his chest by a bullet that had traveled 1,200 meters through challenging environmental conditions to find its mark. The spotter reacted with shock and confusion, unable to comprehend how his partner had been eliminated from such an extreme distance. Thompson stared at Sarah in complete amazement. The shot she had just made would be considered legendary among professional snipers. Military records contain very few confirmed kills at such extreme range, and most of those have been achieved by snipers with decades of experience using specialized equipment. That's impossible, Rodriguez whispered. Nobody makes shots like that. But Sarah was already shifting her attention to the spotter, who was attempting to identify the source of the gunfire that had killed his partner. At 1,200 meters, he would be virtually impossible to locate by conventional means, but Sarah's enhanced perception made his position clearly visible. The spotter made the critical mistake of using his range-finding equipment to search for the source of the shot. This required him to expose his position slightly, creating an opportunity that Sarah's transformed consciousness recognized immediately. Her second shot at the extreme range was even more remarkable than the first. The spotter was presenting a smaller target from a more difficult angle, yet Sarah's bullet found its mark with the same impossible precision. 2 shots, 2 kills, at 1,200 meters, under conditions that military manuals would classify as prohibitive for accurate shooting. Kim shook his head in disbelief. I've been in special operations for 6 years, and I've never seen shooting like this. It's like she can see things that aren't visible to the rest of us. I can, Sarah admitted, finally lowering the rifle. I don't understand how or why, but I can see patterns and possibilities that are completely clear to me. Thompson realized that Sarah's transformation represented something far more significant than exceptional marksmanship. She had somehow accessed capabilities that transcended normal human limitations, demonstrating skills that couldn't be explained by conventional training or experience. We need to move while we have the advantage, Thompson announced, beginning to implement their escape plan. Martinez has bought us the opportunity we needed. The team's evacuation proceeded smoothly, with Sarah providing overwatch as Thompson, Kim, and Jackson moved toward their extraction point. Rodriguez was transported with assistance from Jackson, while Sarah maintained surveillance for additional threats during their movement. During the evacuation, Sarah eliminated 3 more enemy fighters who attempted to intercept the team's movement. Each shot demonstrated the same impossible precision and timing that had characterized her previous engagements. By the time they reached the helicopter landing zone, Sarah had achieved 13 confirmed kills with 13 shots fired. The helicopter extraction proceeded without incident, but during the flight back to base, Sarah felt the enhanced consciousness that had emerged during the firefight beginning to fade. The extraordinary perception and mysterious knowledge slowly receded, leaving her with memories of capabilities that no longer seemed accessible. "How do you feel?" Rodriguez asked as the medical team treated his shoulder injury during the flight. "Different," Sarah replied honestly. "Like I discovered something about myself that I never knew existed." Thompson documented the mission in his after-action report, but he struggled to find words that adequately described what he had witnessed. Sarah's performance during the firefight had saved all their lives while demonstrating capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about human potential. Colonel Mitchell read Thompson's report with amazement and skepticism. 13 confirmed kills with 13 shots, including multiple engagements at extreme range under challenging conditions, achieved by a medic with no specialized marksmanship training, seemed impossible to believe. "Are you certain about these details?" Colonel Mitchell asked during Thompson's debriefing. "Absolutely certain," Thompson replied. "Every member of the team witnessed her shooting. What Martinez accomplished defies explanation, but it happened exactly as reported." Sarah's performance became legendary throughout the special operations community within weeks. Military psychologists began studying her case to understand how extraordinary capabilities could emerge so suddenly and completely. Marksmanship instructors analyzed her techniques to identify methods that might be teachable to other personnel. However, when Sarah attempted to demonstrate her shooting skills during subsequent training exercises, the extraordinary precision and perception had disappeared. She performed well within normal parameters for a medic with basic marksmanship training, but the superhuman capabilities that had emerged during the firefight were no longer accessible. Medical examinations revealed no physical changes that could explain her temporary transformation. Psychological evaluations found no evidence of altered mental state or exceptional spatial abilities. The mysterious emergence and disappearance of her extraordinary marksmanship skills remained unexplained by conventional analysis. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a military psychologist who studied Sarah's case extensively, theorized that extreme stress had somehow unlocked dormant capabilities that existed within her neural structure. Under life-or-death pressure, the human brain can reorganize itself in ways we don't fully understand, she explained. Sarah may have accessed skills that were always present, but never activated. Sarah returned to her primary duties as a medic, but with a reputation that preceded her wherever she served. Fellow service members knew they were working with someone who had demonstrated impossible capabilities when her team's survival depended on it. The story of the healer who became a deadly sniper spread throughout military communities worldwide. Years later, Sarah would reflect on those 72 hours as the defining moment of her life. She never again experienced the extraordinary perception and capabilities that had emerged during the firefight, but she carried the knowledge that human potential could transcend apparent limitations when circumstances demanded the impossible. The gentle hands that had always healed returned to their primary purpose, but they carried the memory of perfect precision under ultimate pressure. Sarah continued saving lives as a medic, but she did so with the confidence of someone who had discovered that heroism could emerge from the most unexpected sources when heroes were desperately needed. Rodriguez eventually recovered full use of his arm and returned to active duty. Kim's leg healed completely, leaving only a small scar as evidence of the firefight. Jackson and Thompson continued their careers in special operations, but they never forgot the day their medic became a legend. The observation post where Sarah's transformation occurred was abandoned shortly after the incident, but local residents reported that birds would not land on the ridge for months afterward, as if the location retained some memory of the impossible events that had transpired there. Sarah Martinez had entered Afghanistan as a healer dedicated to preserving life. She left as a legend who had proven that within every person lies the potential for extraordinary accomplishment when faced with circumstances that demand nothing less than perfection. Her story continues to inspire military personnel and civilians alike, demonstrating that heroism can emerge from the most unexpected sources when the stakes are ultimate and the need is absolute.